Good evening, producer Susan. How are you doing tonight?
Good evening, Jersey Joe. I'm great. How are you?
I'm really good. You staying warm out there?
We just got in a winter weather advisory for tomorrow, ice storm.
Ice storm. Well, we're still waiting for our first flake of snow here in New Jersey, so better you than me. All right. You ready to see if we can fill 30 minutes?
Yeah, happy Fat Tuesday.
Well, that's right. Fat Tuesday, day before Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
And you know why they call it Fat Tuesday?
No, I thought today was Mardi Gras.
Oh, you're right.
Tomorrow's Ash Wednesday.
Fat, you're right. No. Is today? No, today is Tuesday,
Today
right?
is Mardi Gras.
Is today Tuesday? No, today's Tuesday. No, Mardi Gras is on Wednesday. No, tomorrow's Ash Wednesday. You're right.
Tomorrow's Ash Wednesday. Today
Right.
is
So yeah,
Mardi
Fat
Gras.
Tuesday, right? Which is
Today's Fat Tuesday.
and it's Fat Tuesday because you gorge because tomorrow's Ash Wednesday. You're supposed to fast. So okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. Let me tell you what we're going to try to squeeze in today. Well, first of all, that's the situation with Jersey Joe. It's news and perspective you won't hear in TV. And I guarantee you, I've got several stories that I guarantee you haven't heard about on TV, but they're, I think, stories of great interest. You're going to hear some perspective. You're going to hear a perspective on at least one story that I know you heard on TV, but you didn't hear, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. Our quote of the day is going to be from Florida Sheriff Grady Judd, who you may have heard on, he does the intro to some of our taxpayer relief shots. And in 2018, 5 years ago on Valentine's Day, they had the mass shooting at the Marjorie Stoneham high school in Florida, and he's going to talk about what they've done to improve school security in Florida, and that's going to tie into our first story. And our stupidest thing I've heard all week, and we'll tell you about a comment by CNN commentator Don Lemon, what he said when Nikki Haley, who announced that she was going to be seeking the presidential nomination for a Republican nomination for president. In this month's Darwin Award winner, we'll tell you about how a thief in California met with an untimely death by trying to steal a catalytic converter from a pickup truck. In our You Won't Hear This on TV segment, we have two stories. The first one is about how a good guy with a gun put an end to a shooting spree that started in an El Paso shopping mall last week. And in this section, this one is about how a Georgia charity founded by gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams can't account for more than $500,000 that's missing from the charity that she founded. We'll give you an update on how New York City is dealing with housing illegal immigrants arriving into that city. And our Science Minute will answer the question, is the sun on fire? The answer might surprise you. And producer Susan, get ready, because I'm going to ask you that question when we get around to it. And our taxpayer relief shot is about a good guy with a gun stopping a murderer in an apartment complex from killing even more victims. How's that sound? You think we can fill 30 minutes?
I think you could probably fill 60 minutes.
All right. So let me get to Sheriff Grady talking about what they've done to improve school safety and in Florida. And then I'm going to tie that into our first story. So here's Sheriff Grady. Hopefully this will work.
There's a new Florida gun bill. We've got armed guardians, our armed officers, our deputies on the campus. Anyone who tells you that is not living in the realm of reality. They just aren't. Now, the bad guys with guns already have guns, or will steal guns, or will use guns. At that moment in time, that day in time, there was a clear law against bringing a gun onto a campus. But you think Nicholas cared about that? No, he didn't care, because he was there to murder people. Law-abiding citizens follow the law. Criminals do not. There needs, and there is, robust systems and processes as an outcropping of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas laws and commission's work. The commission, and I know all of those commissioners, they are remarkable people, and their heart and soul is to keep children safe, not only in Florida, but across the nation. And I join that. But make no mistake about it. Here we go. That we have to put layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of security in place. And we've done that. We are now plugging and have plugged mental health counselors and what we call orange teams or threat assessment systems in place. That's important. But when all of that fails and the next Nicholas Cruz shows up with a firearm on a campus, violating all the rules, getting through all of the layers of protection, if there's not someone there with a firearm to shoot that person graveyard dead at that moment in time,
Shoot them graveyard dead at that moment in time.
more students and more teachers are going to be killed. So I become angry when people with their editorial comments say, oh, we need less guns, not more guns. Don't you understand that criminals don't follow the rules? That there are millions upon millions upon millions of guns here? They're here. And to think that we don't want good, honest people that know how to handle a gun, care to handle it, to have a gun to keep themselves and others safe, I have a problem with that. So at the end of the day, rules are in place. If you violate the law with your handgun, we'll make sure, or your rifle, we'll make sure that you're appropriately criminally charged. But the good people of this state who care enough to appropriately, professionally, and safely handle a firearm, learn how to shoot it, stay proficient with it, and that's the only ones that should carry a concealed firearm. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Producer Sue, what do you think about what Sheriff Judd said?
Yeah, I agree with him. It's a mental health crisis, not a gun crisis, and law-abiding citizens follow the law. And these people that are the majority of these shootings are people who got the guns illegally.
Yep.
So
And
laws are not going to stop that.
no, and in fact, when I get to what you didn't hear in the news, we're going to talk about, I think everybody heard about the shooting at the El Paso Mall last week. What they didn't tell you is that the shooter, who turned out to be a 16-year-old kid, by the way, with an illegal gun, was stopped by a citizen with a concealed carry permit who shot him. You didn't hear that in the news, did you?
Nope, I did
All
not.
right. So let's talk about a couple of stories that tie right into what Sheriff Judd said about being able to protect yourself. Now, by the way, last week, I told you a story about the shooting deaths of 3 Michigan State students who were shot to death and 5 others who were wounded. And it turns out that some of the details in that original USA Today story that I quoted from last week about the shooter being a convicted felon not legally allowed to own a gun were not correct. And to tie that story back to, and I want to tie that story back to a story from 2 weeks ago. Remember the child rapist who was offered a 6-month plea deal for raping a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old girl? You remember that?
Yes,
deal, right?
unbelievable.
No. So let me tell you what happened in Michigan. It turns out that the shooter was in fact arrested on a felony gun charge in 2019. And had he been tried and convicted on that felony gun charge, number one, he probably would have still been in jail and not able to shoot anybody. And even if he had been released on parole, he would not have been able to legally purchase handguns. Well, guess what? The prosecutor in Michigan, who was handling that felony gun case, plea bargained it down to a misdemeanor. The guy spent 6 months in jail. And because a misdemeanor does not prohibit you from legally buying a gun, he went out and after he was released on his 6-month sentence, went out and legally purchased 2 handguns from a gun dealer and used those 2 handguns to kill 3 students and wound 5 others. And by the way, it was illegal for any of those students or anybody else, any of the teachers on campus, to have a gun. But did he care? No. So I want to get back to, who you vote for county prosecutor and judges matters, because in this case, the prosecutor, now you can argue, well, he might have been able to get guns illegally, but the point is, the prosecutor who plea bargained his felony down to a misdemeanor facilitated that killer in getting his guns. Now, you didn't hear that on the news, did you?
No, I did not.
So again, this is just another case where you're plea bargaining dangerous people down and turning them back out in the street. And I think 2 weeks before that, I told you about the 38-year guy who shot the off-duty cop who went to buy a used car, and he was 38 years old and had 22 prior felony arrests. And he's 38 years old, 22 felony arrests, and he's walking around on the streets of New York City with an illegal gun in his pocket. How does that happen? Prosecutors soft on crime. Anyway, but that's my point. Most people that get their ballot, they don't bother to vote for county prosecutor, they don't bother to vote for judge, or they just check reelect. Don't do that, because it really does matter. Because I believe we have enough gun laws on the books, but they don't do any good if prosecutors and judges don't enforce those laws. I mean, if you're going to arrest a guy on a felony gun charge and then let him back out in the street with a misdemeanor slap on the wrist, what good does it do to have the law on the books to begin with? All right. Anyway, producer Sue, you know who Nikki Haley is, right?
Yes, she ran for president. Was it it was when Trump ran against Hillary. What year was that?
Well, yeah, and she was
She was one of the Republican candidates, right?
She ran in the primary. She didn't make it. She was, at the time, she was the governor of South Carolina, very, very successful. And after Trump was elected, he appointed her as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. She did a commendable job as UN ambassador. So, she's got great track, successful 2-term governor, ambassador to the United Nations, spotless track record. Anyway, last week she announced that she intended to seek the Republican nomination for president of the United States. And Don Lemon, who's a commentator on CNN, did you hear what he said about her announcement?
No, I did not hear what he said.
You didn't hear what he said? He said in discussing her announcement that she intended to seek the nomination, he said at age 51, she is past her prime.
Wait, isn't he older than her?
He will turn 57 on March 1st. He's 57, 11 months and 3 weeks old. I mean, he's 56, 11 months. He turns 57 next week.
And our current president is what?
79. He'll be
79, 80.
79. So my question is, past her prime for what role? To play on a woman NBA basketball team? To win the New York City Marathon? Become a surrogate mother? Become a TV commentator on CNN? When I heard her say she's past her prime, 3 names just immediately jumped into my mind. And those names were Margaret Thatcher, Golda Meir, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Do you know who those 3 people are?
Margaret Thatcher from England, and
Prime Minister of Great
Ruth
Britain.
Ginsburg was our justice who recently passed away last year.
And Golda Meir?
I don't know who that is.
She was the Prime Minister of Israel during the very, very turbulent time. They all were remarkable women who did remarkable things in their 60s and 70s. So, I thought did he think they were past their prime? Did he think Margaret Thatcher, one of the most successful and accomplished prime ministers of Great Britain, Golda Meir of Israel, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is he saying she should have
Madeleine Albright?
Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State. So I'm wondering if Lemon thinks that all of them were past their prime and shouldn't have been in their roles in making those important decisions. So
I heard Nikki Haley say on the news last week about she would like mental competency tests for presidents. And I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think she said if you're over 75, and I think, now obviously it's not in the Constitution, you can't impose that, but I think voluntary people should say, yeah, I will submit to a competency test. When I do my annual physical, the guy asked me he'll ask me something. He'll say, quick, how much is 6 times 7? How much is 9 times 9? He'll ask me a couple of quick math problems and to see how quick I can answer them. So, and I think that's good. You're checking for signs of senility and mental decline. But anyway, so I'm wondering, I don't recall him saying anything about Joe Biden being, quote, past his prime when he ran for president in 2020 at the age of 78. Did you hear him say anything about Biden being past his
No,
prime?
I didn't.
Well, if he didn't say it then, if not, why not? I guess.
And I
it's-
believe that Hillary, I don't know how old she is. I just looked it up. Hillary was in her 70s when she ran.
And yeah, so anyway, so Don turns 57 next week. I guess he passed his prime and he should retire. And by the way, if any of you have heard anything that was more stupid than that last week, please let me know. Producer Sue, did you hear anything that was more stupid than that?
I don't know if I heard anything more stupid, but I always hear quite a few things that make me shake my head.
Right. All right. I've got a Darwin Award winner about a thief stealing a catalytic converter. But rather than me tell you about it, let's see if I can get this audio clip to play. This is a guy in California at night. He crawls under a parked car and tries to, and he's in the process of process of stealing the catalytic converter. And let me see if I can get this ad to play. Anyway, the guy meets an untimely death. And let's see, I got a vamp here for about 15 more seconds. So anyway, as he's under the car, he's got one of these battery-powered chop saws, a little, hand saw. And what he didn't know is that there was a woman asleep in the truck, and she got awakened by the sound of the saw. And here we go.
Tragic story. A man who authorities say was trying to steal a catalytic converter from a truck has been run over and killed by the driver of that truck. It all happened in Palmdale. Eyewitness News reporter Leo Stallworth is there live with the details. Leo?
Well, you nailed it when you said bizarre. This is a very busy parking lot, multiple stores in this area, and for this to happen in broad daylight. I mean, well, it was 6 o'clock at night, according to detectives. They say that the suspect slid underneath the victim's vehicle while she was asleep in the vehicle right here in this parking lot, started sawing away to grab that catalytic converter, and things went horribly wrong. Here's more. An attempted catalytic converter theft turns fatal when detective says suspect crawled underneath the woman's truck while she was asleep inside. Investigators say as the suspect began sawing the catalytic converter, the sleeping woman inside the truck woke up, panicking, hearing the noise. She hit the gas, fatally running the suspect over. This unfolding around 6 last night outside of the busy Target shopping center parking lot in Palmdale. This kind of brazen, bold crime scaring people. It's bad.
And I don't think we need to hear all the passerbys and neighbors, but you think that guy wins the Darwin Award winner?
Yeah.
Did you hear about that one on the news?
I did not hear about that one.
So again, that's why we call it the situation stories you may not have heard about. But that was in California. All right. Moving on. Where were we? By the way, she started the engine, put the car in reverse, and when she felt the bump, she got out and called 911 after she saw a man on the ground. And the guy had been dropped off by 3 other people in the car. They had brought him there, let him out. He crawled under. They arrested the other 3. Now, let's move on to the El Paso shooting. And I mentioned this last week. Remember when we had a little discussion about what is a mass shooting and how the media was claiming that the El Paso incident was a mass shooting? We reviewed what is a mass shooting, how many people killed at random. It turns out it wasn't random. It was 2 groups of Hispanic males. One of them, a 16-year-old, pulled out a gun, shot and killed one of the others, and was shooting and running down the hall. But the point is, you didn't have 4 dead bodies. The victims were not selected at random. And the shooter was a 16-year-old in possession of a legal gun. Now, so you didn't hear any of that follow-up. All you heard was there was a, quote, mass shooting in an El Paso shopping mall. That's all you heard. What they didn't tell you and will never tell you is here's the other side. He was stopped. He was still shooting. There was a citizen with a concealed carry permit in the mall at the time, and he happened to observe this, and he pulled out his gun and wounded the 16-year-old shooter, stamping the rampage. And here's a quote from the print news media. I can't play an audio. If I had an audio, I would, but this never made the network news. Here's a quote from the print story. Police confirm the second group consisted of a 16-year-old boy who has been identified as the shooter, a 20-year-old man who was injured, a 17-year-old boy, and a 15-year-old boy. Police say the confrontation between the two groups escalated into a physical fight, and the 16-year-old suspect reportedly pulled out a handgun. Police have confirmed the handgun was reported to be stolen. Now, after the shooting, the 16-year-old suspect began to run and pointing the gun towards bystanders, including 32-year-old Emmanuel Duran, who has been identified by police to be a licensed concealed weapons carry holder. As the 16-year-old ran towards Duran and other bystanders, Duran drew his handgun and shot him, according to police. I wonder why that never made the news. Any thoughts?
Don't know.
Don't know, because probably I think the media has a bias, so much of an anti-gun bias, that they never want to tell you about good guys with guns stopping crime. They only want to tell you about when the bad guys with guns misuse them. So I think it's, again, it's bias on my part, but I think the media just has an anti-gun bias, and they never want to tell you when a good guy with a gun uses a gun to prevent crime. Now, here's the second news story you didn't hear on TV. Now, do you know who Stacey Abrams is?
Is she governor or senator of, is it Georgia?
Well, she's a large black woman, and she ran for governor of Georgia. She lost the election. Yeah, and she was touted as a potential candidate when Biden, during the Democratic primary. But she's a failed gubernatorial candidate for governor. But she started a charity. And here's a quote from the story that you didn't hear about on the news. She started a charity called the New Georgia Project. And the New Georgia Project filed its 2021 Form 990 financial disclosure. If you're a charity, you don't pay taxes, but you do have to file a Form 990 every year with the IRS saying this is how much money we took in and this is how much money we spent. And by the way, so they filed that form 2 months after it was due to the IRS and 3 months after the charity's board chairman fired their CEO, a guy named Avnice Ufat, who was Abrams' handpicked leader in the group. In the disclosure, the New Georgia Project reports a $533,000 consulting payment and a $67,000 grant to the Black Male Initiative, another charity, an obscure charity run in part by Ufat's brother, Edema, a former New Georgia Project employee. But the Black Male Initiative says it never received any such consulting payments. The group provided the Washington Free Beacon with its own IRS financial disclosure, which shows it collected zero in consulting income and just $255,000 in contributions from all sources, not just the Stacey Abrams New Georgia Project, but all sources. So here you've got the Black Male Initiative saying, hey, we got a total of we got zero in consulting fees, and we got a total of $255 from all sources. No, we didn't get $533,000 from the Stacey Abrams charity, and we certainly didn't get a $67,000 grant from them. So between those two numbers, there's $600,000 of cash that's gone missing from Stacey Abrams' charity in Georgia. Again, a story you didn't hear on TV. Any thoughts?
Yeah, where's the accountability? Where's the checks and balances?
Right, by the way, same thing happened with the Black Lives Matter movement. You heard it. There's $5 million unaccounted for in Black Lives Matter charity, right? The nonprofit.
There needs to be checks and balances with every charity.
Right. Well, once again, we have a charity that has no accountability. So who knows what's going to happen, if there'll be prosecutions or any follow-up. Anyway, you ready to move on to the ongoing saga of immigrants in New York City?
What did they do this week, or what did the government do this week to the illegal immigrants?
Well, they believe now that they have about 46,000 illegal immigrants in New York City. We talked a couple of weeks ago how they were trying to move some of the single guys out of a hotel to put them in a barracks style facility on one of the piers, because they needed those hotel rooms for families with kids, right? Because the hotel rooms have showers. Well, you want to know how many hotels that the New York City is paying $190, and that's an average of $190 a night. You know how many hotels the city of New York is now housing illegal immigrants?
I'm going to guess it's like a couple thousand rooms. I don't know how many actual hotels.
Yeah, a couple thousand rooms in 85 hotels. And here's a quote from the print story. New York has continued to hand out free stays at luxury hotels to thousands of migrants, most recently offering rooms at the 3-star Wingate by Wyndham. Now, I've been in a Wingate by Wyndham. That's not your Holiday Inn Express. Wingate by Wyndham is a nice hotel. So on Wednesday, New York City Mayor Eric Adams announced that becomes the city's newest, quote, emergency shelter. And the one question I have for the mayor is, are any of those hotel rooms available to homeless U.S. veterans who are currently living on the street? And actually, I don't have to ask him that question because I already know the answer is no. None of those hotel rooms are available to homeless U.S. veterans living on the street. Any thoughts on where New York City is going?
Yeah, I think like you said, we need to take care of some of our own as well. And I'm also curious to know all these immigrants that we're housing, they're not working, right? They can't work, at least not legally.
They're not allowed to work, right?
So
not allowed to
they
legally
just
work, right?
sitting there watching television all day. I mean,
yeah.
I presume that most of these immigrants came to America for a better life, knowing that they would want to work, and yet they're not working.
They're not working, exactly. By the way, here's an interesting, I didn't have this on the list, but a quick aside. In Denver, Denver had a fund to help people who had lost their jobs due to COVID. Well, it turns out there was an illegal alien got a job working off the books for a bakery. And when COVID hit, the bakery laid him off. Well, then city of Denver started this program, and I forget the name of the program. Maybe we'll talk about it next week. That provided, it wasn't unemployment. It was like a guaranteed monthly income. And it provides $2,000 a month for people who had lost their job and, quote, were not otherwise eligible for federal aid. Well, if you're not otherwise eligible for federal aid, what does that translate to if you're not otherwise eligible for federal aid? It means you're an illegal alien, right?
Yeah.
He's getting $2,000 a month from the Denver taxpayers for doing nothing because he was an illegal alien who was working illegally, got laid off because of COVID, and the city of Denver is now paying him $2,000 a month to do nothing. So, all right. How much time we got, producer Sue?
Let's see. You've got about 10 minutes or so.
All right, let's do our science minute. So here's the question for you. Is the sun on fire?
No, it's not.
Why do you say that?
The sun is actually a giant ball of gas, not a giant ball of fire. And we talked about this a few weeks ago about the difference between fusion and fission, and what the sun is doing. It's creating nuclear fusion of atoms, putting them together. Correct.
And let me kind of dumb this down a little bit. If you see a cauldron of liquid molten steel, now that steel is red and it's bubbling and it's giving off heat and it's giving off light. But is that cauldron of steel on fire?
No.
No. So just because something is hot and glowing and spitting and giving off heat and light doesn't mean it's on fire. In fact, fire, I'll get a little technical. You know what
you need oxygen for.
Right. You have to have oxygen to get a flame, and there is no oxygen on the sun. In fact, the definition of fire is that it's an exothermic chemical reaction where oxygen combines with another combustible material. And then when that happens, by the way, neither the oxygen, or in this case, let's say methane, when oxygen combines with methane to form a flame, neither the oxygen nor the methane or the hydrogen, it's actually the hydrogen and the methane, they all retain their identity. So in other words, if you take hydrogen and oxygen and put a match to it, you will get water vapor because after hydrogen and oxygen combine, H2O, what you get a flame, and the byproduct of that is H2O. But the hydrogen and the oxygen maintain their unique atomic identities. And in fact, you can take that water that is the product of that. By the way, you ever start your car in the winter and see water drip out the tailpipe?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, that's the product of the combustion that's taking place in your tailpipe, because the oxygen in the atmosphere is combining with the hydrogen in the gas, in the liquid gas. And in addition to CO2, it produces water vapor. And you can, in fact, capture that water vapor coming out of your tailpipe, put it through an electrolysis process, and split the water back into hydrogen and oxygen. So in a true exothermic chemical reaction, the particles or the atoms that are part of that retain their own identity. In the sun, hydrogen is fused, smashed together to become a different element. Hydrogen is smashed together to become helium, and the hydrogen no longer exists. So no. So if you want to win a bar bet, ask people, is the sun a ball of fire in the sky? And the answer is no, it is not a ball of fire. It's a glowing orb of gas, but it is not on fire. All right. Ready to move on to a taxpayer relief shot?
Yep. In
All
our
right,
last
now-
5 minutes.
For those people who don't know what a taxpayer relief shot is, we call them taxpayer relief shots because when a good guy with a gun shoots, and unlike the guy in the El Paso Mall who only shoot and wounded the shooter, when a good guy with a gun shoots and kills the thug, it saves the taxpayers the cost of a jury trial, public defender, imprisonment at the cost of $80,000 a year, probation expenses. And by the way, once a guy's in prison, he's getting free meals, free clothing, free medical treatment. By the way, if you're a prisoner, you need a kidney transplant, which is a $300,000 operation. The prison system pays for a kidney transplant. And here's how the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida, feels about shooting bad guys.
Somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully you'll save taxpayers money.
And just for a little perspective, we had Sheriff Grady Judd on for our quote of the week. And let me see if I can find what Sheriff Grady Judd, he has a slightly different take than the Santa Rosa County. And here's what Sheriff Grady Judd says.
I would highly suggest that if a looter breaks into your home, comes into your home while you're there to steal stuff, that you take your gun and you shoot him. You shoot him so that he looks like grated cheese.
All right, so let's see if we can find what happened down in Georgia when a guy with a knife was going through the parking lot stabbing women. He had already killed one. And that's when a neighbor heard, this was 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and he had already,
At Free Tax
Well,
USA.
a neighbor living in the complex had heard the women screaming.
Intuitive software makes file.
And here's what the,
Well, taking a turn, another top story tonight, Union City Police praising the actions of a neighbor who stopped a man who had stabbed 3 women earlier this morning. The details are like something straight out of a movie. Fox 5's Kim Luffler has more on what happened.
And I just couldn't sit there and watch and hear and see what was going on.
Josh Staub says he jumped into action when he heard something going on in his Union City neighborhood early Saturday morning.
Just woke up this morning, heard a lot of commotion going on, looked outside, seen something going on. And I was just being a good Samaritan and stepped up and looked out for someone to save someone's life.
Union City Police were called to the Hidden Lake Apartments around 6:40 Saturday morning. When officers got there, police say a woman told them she'd been stabbed and said others needed help.
Officers responded to that location where they observed a female lying outside in between cars who had also been stabbed, as well as 2 subjects behind the apartment, the incident location, that one had been stabbed and appeared the other one had been shot.
Police say the person who was shot was the one who stabbed the women.
As the male suspect was assaulting these female subjects with the knife, a onlooker saw the assault taking place. He stepped up, he took action, he stopped the threat. He did shoot the suspect. We actually commend them for what they did in stepping up.
Because I have a daughter and I respect my females and everything out there. So I'm just doing the right thing, stepping up.
Police say one of the women died after being stabbed. The suspect was taken to the hospital where he later died from his injuries. Police are still looking into exactly what led up to all this. But they say right now this does appear to be the result of a domestic dispute. In Union City, Kim Luffler, Fox 5 News.
so what do you think, producer Sue? Good shooting?
Yep, but it seems justified.
Right. And by the way, I don't know if you could tell from the vocal inflection, but this was a young black man. You know, so, and by the way, I think it's, I think about half it could, maybe I'm imagining this, but it seems to me maybe 35, 40, 50% of the taxpayer relief shots we do involve a black man or a black woman either defending themselves or defending somebody else. Is that your recollection or does that sound about right?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, so it's not always just some white guy. So it's not, there's no racial bias here. Again, I think, and I'm happy to see that. By the way, I think we talked about 8 or 9 weeks ago about how nearly 20% of the 20 million guns last year were purchased by African Americans. So I personally think legally purchased, right? So I personally think it's a good thing that African Americans are understanding and come to the conclusion. We need to do to protect ourselves. How much time we got?
You only have about a minute.
All right, well, then I better sign off. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to send any comments or questions, send them to Joe at JerzeeJoe.com. That's JER as in Roger, Z as in zebra, EE, JerzeeJoe.com. The website is JerzeeJoe.com. And again, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, just email them to me at Joe@JerzeeJoe.com. And with that, unless you have anything to add, Producer Sue, I will call it a night. How about you?
Happy Fat Tuesday.
All right, talk to you next week. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.